I wrote a piece of software, but I designed it in a way that when someone will see it, it will bring him value or bring her more value than the software he could have built himself. So it's not about integration, make just things work and we don't care about what's behind the scene. No. It's about how I'm sure that something have been produced to give me more value than if I did it myself.
From Toro Cloud, this is the Coding Over Cocktails podcast, a free pour of thoughts and ideas from IT experts, thought leaders, and authors, sharing their insights and advice for individuals architecting solutions for the ever-changing landscape of enterprise tech, digital transformation, and more. Welcome to episode 65 of the Coding Over Cocktails podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Montalvo. Our guest for today is an entrepreneur, author, and investor in software in the API industry. He founded the popular APIDays Conferences in 2012, the main series of conferences on APIs and data portability. He is now the co-founder of Alias, a data protection API engine, and was the co-founder of the API identity portability platform OAuth.io, acquired in 2017. He also has several books and reports under his name, which include Continuous API Management, which we'll be talking about today, the State of the API Industry Landscape 2022 report, and Regulating Big Tech, Empowering the Many by Regulating the Few. Joining us today for a round of cocktails is Mehdi Medjaoui. Hi, Mehdi. Welcome to Coding Over Cocktails.
Hi, Kevin. I'm really glad to be there, and thank you very much for having me.
All right, we're glad that you're with us. So let's dive into the questions. You're one of the co-founders of the APIDays Conferences. So can you tell us a bit about your role as chairman, and more curiously, how did you come to found this conference?
So we were in 2012, the new, protocols enabling to have APIs that was to be really, really easily implementable compared to previous protocols was coming up, like REST, JSON especially. So we wanted to evangelize larger companies about this new digital transformation that was completely API-led or API-enabled. And when we try to pitch, do you know about APIs? There with recent technology, there are new ways to interface software with each other and to connect, become marketplaces, platform. Whoa, nobody understood anything. They were relying on old protocols that was not really be able to be opened. Like the SOA, software-oriented architecture, service-oriented architecture, but that was not really made to be open. But we've seen some companies like Twitter, Flickr, Google, Facebook, like having open APIs and being really successful. So we said, okay, we need a conference. We need a conference to attract developers, architects, business managers to understand what we call the API mindset. So we started in 2012 and we made a first conference. It was just, one Google group. Do you remember Google Groups?
Yeah, yes. Google Groups, yeah.
Yeah, we had at the time, and it was funny, it was trendy. And so it was mostly the API Craft Google group. I just posted something and said, look, let's meet in Paris for Christmas. Let's meet all together. We never met each other. So let's meet together. And we started mostly as an international meetup. And after the conference, I said, okay, do you want to organize in your own country? I will help and I will be highly involved. And Spain said yes, San Francisco said yes, Berlin, Melbourne. And so finally we have now 10 conferences a year in 10 different countries. And so far we attracted like 300,000 people online or in person at APIDays conferences, pushing the API mindset for all and on the technical side, but also on the business side, because we need business people who have the budget to fund, the IT side of APIs.
Right. And that was interesting what you said there, that you started out as an international community already. And I would imagine that the pandemic really affected how you ran these APIDays conferences. So did you continue to run the conferences during the pandemic? Were you able to, continue them on an online remote basis, or was this one of the early, formats that you had already, and were you already skilled enough or experienced enough at running this at that level?
So, we have Twitter, we have email, we have YouTube. So the goal was to really, before the pandemic, the goal was, as we said, and I start every APIDays conferences like that, the goal is to connect the humans behind APIs, the humans behind interfaces, right? So we wanted to be in person. We didn't want to stream. We didn't want to be a virtual or live. We wanted people to be there. But with the pandemic, actually, we had the question, do we stop? Or do we go at a higher level and we fulfill and we continue to fulfill our mission is to connect human behind APIs. The only way was to do it virtually. And so, yes, we said, okay, we follow our mission and DNA. And finally, we went online for 2 years. The community followed. It was great because now we could have speakers we couldn't have before because of travel, because of busy timing. Attendees from worldwide. The event could be free because online, it costs less. So we can completely make it free to make it more accessible for underserved people worldwide. And now we're back in person plus virtual, like hybrid this year. But yeah, I think all conferences will need to be virtual at some point, hybrid, but the full in person only will be difficult to support, I think, for events. And we've seen already conferences stop. We've seen so many conferences just stopped. We're glad to survive. We're glad that because the community is there and the sponsors are there. And yes, we really want to thank all the community to have been supportive during these 2 years.
Yeah, and I bet they missed, all that traveling, that airport food and the hotel food, right? All right. So in 2019, you also co-founded Alias, which aims to help companies ensure that they are GDPR compliant. Now, I know most of our listeners would already be familiar with GDPR, but for the uninitiated, can you start with a brief refresher or explanation of what GDPR is and how it affects companies collecting data on individuals?
Yeah, let's say GDPR, it's a law, it's a regulation applying to every company who interact with European citizen data or people who are on the territory of Europe. So it can be an American, but based in Europe, right? And it obliges you, if I try to make it simple, but it obliges you to know at any time what is the data you collect, how do you collect it, is it compliant? Like, does it follow specific what we call legal base? And where is the data? How it will be processed by which company, which sub-processors that they call it. And so you have a really, really good view about what you do with the data. Just imagine like the ingredient list when you buy, for example, a cornflakes or when you buy a specific ice cream or whatever, you can go back and look at behind what's inside. So the goal is the same with GDPR, but with personal data. And so now every company needs to be compliant if they want to interact with European citizen data. But the thing is, USA now has many laws who are following GDPR. China has a law following GDPR. Singapore, India, Australia, and 60 countries have GDPR-like regulations. So it's not only Europe, it's worldwide. And just to say, by the end of the year, 2/3 of the world population will be under GDPR regulation. So it's almost any business who wants to interact with personal data will have to follow these regulations. And what we do, try to make it really simple. We do a data protection engine. Just imagine it's like a AI lawyer that gives you what to do and when to do it. We just put sensors. You put sensors in your code, databases, apps, SaaS, whatever, and you send it to our engine. You send the events. What's happening? Right? What's happening? A user clicked here, a user opened a newsletter, a user bought a product. The engine just analyzes it. Oh, you just bought a product. Now you can keep the data according to the law. You have to keep the data at least 5 years, not 3 years anymore. So we give you these insights about what you have to do according to the 60 regulations. So our baseline is like integrate with Alias engine and continue to not worry about GDPR anymore. So that's what we do.
Right. And I took a glance at your website, and in order to help companies become GDPR compliant, you've done a couple of APIs on your side, which are first the PII Storage Duration API, please correct me if I'm wrong, and the Alias GDPR Events API. Can you run us through what these APIs do for companies?
So, it's like for food, when you are a restaurant and you have food, you have a specific date. You can continue to sell it over a specific date. After it becomes not proper for consumption. The regulation put the same for personal data. So you can't keep personal data forever. You have to declare how long you keep it, or by regulation, you have to keep it for a certain time and not anymore. And so we help you to know for what type of data, where it's stored, and how did you collect it. So a lot of variables, but we help you say, oh, this data in this context is 2 years, but in this other country, the same context is 5 years. In this country, in the same context is 3 years. So we give you like the whole jurisprudence, all the legal cases to tell you without knowing the law, what you have to do with the data. So that's the storage duration API, the PII Storage Duration API. And the Events API, it's an API that enables you, that listen to the events that happen in your system, right? And gives you that enable maximization of use of data according to the law. So we look at all the laws available in the country, and we tell you, okay, if the user, for example, when the user becomes a customer, from prospect to customer, you have the right to keep the data for longer, but you have also the obligation to keep some data for 5 years or 10 years. Just an example, invoice. In France, you have to keep the invoice for 10 years. And everybody forget that. So yeah, we give you these insights and in machine readable way, and we tell you, yeah, the user data you have to write to keep it for 3 years for marketing purposes, but the invoice data is 10 years for legal reasons. And so we give you all these insights as the lawyer would do, but the lawyer is like $400 per hour, just give you one insight, and we give you millions of insights for millions of users, for the same price of a lawyer.
Yeah. So do you have like individual lawyers working for you who are, looking at all these international laws and all these regulations that are, I'm pretty sure they're different for each country, right?
Yeah, they're different for each country. Even in Europe, where it's the same regulation, it's not the same for all the type of data in Poland, in France, in Germany, in UK, in whatever. It's different. So yeah, so we have a team of PhD in law and lawyers who does the job all day about analyzing all of this. Of course, there are some legal databases that we can look at, but there is laws. So we do the work for all. We do the work once for all, and we deliver it by an API instead of having incomplete infos in many lawyer firms that actually you pay their training. You say, okay, look for this, and you pay their time of learning. You don't have to pay for learning. You pay for the advice. And this is why we think an engine giving you the advice in real time, on the fly, with accumulated knowledge is the solution to really lower the barrier of being compliant and lower the barrier of knowing the law at scale.
Yeah, and the work doesn't stop there, because on your website, it says that the data processor API is coming soon. Can you give us a sneak peek of what this data processor API will do in the future?
Yeah, actually, when you collect data, you can process it yourself. So you treat it yourself. You do a specific AI algorithm. You store it in your own CRM. But if you use a third-party CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot or another one, it's called a subprocessors. So you have to be sure these subprocessors respect and is also compliant, right? So when you, for example, some countries don't allow their data to go out of the country. They don't allow, for example, children data to go out of the country. If you put this data in a SaaS platform or in a IaaS or PaaS platform, actually you're not compliant because some of these SaaS platforms replicate data outside the country. So this data processor API helps you to know if you put data there, what does that imply? Does the data go out of the country or not? And so are you compliant if you use that service or not?
Oh, okay. So I'm just curious on whether actual SaaS companies and iPaaS or what have you, these as a service companies, do they approach you as well, or is it more of a business to company or business to client engagement? Like, are you more engaged with customers or businesses themselves, or do you have like clients from the as a service side of the equation?
Yeah, most of the company now are as a service at some point. They all deliver a software as a service website or application or whatever. But yeah, no, our goal, how we operate, we give APIs for developers, because internally developers have to do the compliance. So data protection officers tell what to do, but developers do it. That's their job. But sometimes they're lost, so they found our APIs. And they say, okay, they talk to their data protection officer and say, look, it seems these guys have done APIs that does the job, right? So let's work together. and let's implement Alias APIs inside our IT system. So we have sensors and we can really handle this in real time. So that's mostly how it works. We are a B2D, like business to developers. But after the developers are onboarded, they tell their managers about like, yeah, this is the way to do, right? So that's how it works.
Yeah, and of course they'll ask them if they're willing to pay, right? Anyway, you've co-authored the book Continuous API Management with Eric Wild, Ronnie Mitra, and Mike Amundsen. The latter two, they've been guests of the show, actually, friends of the show. And I assume that this book and your experience with APIs has fueled, the growth of your company, Alias. But before we dive into the specific topics of said book, can you tell us some of the key updates that you've made from the first edition that compelled you to come out with this brand new second edition?
Yeah, the second edition, sometimes you have to version APIs when something new is out. So why not versioning books on APIs, right? So that's the joke we had internally with the team. But in this new version, so of course we keep the same core principle of the first version, but the second version really adds more. Actually, listening to feedbacks of readers of the first edition, it adds more how to apply and really concrete methodologies or concrete cases, more practical stuff. So that's the first part. There's also a second part, another new chapter, which is on API styles. A lot of people were telling us about, but you didn't help us to decide about between REST or GraphQL or hypermedia APIs or event-driven architecture or stuff like that. So we added a new chapter dedicated in that for people to understand that continuously managing APIs is the same methodology and philosophy, whatever the protocol, the format, the vocabularies you use and everything, or the API styles. But it helps to remind that some specificities about managing GraphQL APIs versus managing REST APIs or whatever. So yeah, mostly more practical stuff, more, let's say, updated numbers or updated on principles, more methodology and practices, but also more a new chapter on API styles.
Right. You talked about API styles. I'm going to go back and circle back to that question later on because I'm interested about this third chapter which delves into why we consider APIs as a product. So we've been hearing about API as a product a lot, not only in the show, but a lot in blogs on LinkedIn and in other podcasts as well. So why do you think it's important for companies and IT teams to realize that this perspective of having an API as a product perspective within their organization would be essential to create or form an API strategy?
Let's say the real API as a product shift came really when we stopped thinking about APIs for integration, but APIs for consumption. You consume a product, but you integrate a technology or service or whatever, right? And so integration is just about making things work technically. Product and consumption means that I consume because it brings me enough value, right? So this is what I love. I think it's Amancio Buza who say he call APIs VPIs, like value proposition interfaces. Even if it's internal APIs or external APIs, the API product mindset is say, look, I wrote a piece of software, but I design it in a way that when someone will see it, it will bring him value or bring her more value than the software he could have built himself. So it's not about integration, make just things work and we don't care about what's behind the scene. No. It's about how I'm sure that something have been produced to give me more value than if I did it myself. And this is why we've seen the success of companies like Stripe and Twilio and Segment, SendGrid, Avalara, who all thought APIs as a product to be consumed by others in a, let's say, a digital supply chain, right? So that's really this idea. And this API product mindset changed a lot of things inside the business teams, because the business teams say, look, yeah, actually we can be a marketplace. We can be a platform. We can have outstanding, how I call it, programmable business models, to make business by opening software to others. And mostly the API economy is the as a service economy, right? You consume what others are doing to focus on what you do the best, but you will open what you do the best as APIs because to be consumed by others, so they can focus on their own core businesses. And that's, it took 100 years to happen in the classic industry, brick and mortar industry with supply chain. It took us 2 decades to do it in the software industry. And now we see so many APIs as product companies, and they are outstanding, and they are achieving a lot of value at scale because of this capability to be self-service, to be easily consumed, to be developer friendly. And so people come, discover the documentation, discover the value, integrate. If it's well documented, they don't even talk to a human about support. And it goes like that. You become a platform because people come consume in self-service. And so like this, you accumulate value at scale.
Right. And shout out to Amancio Buza, who's been in the show twice already. So nice shout out there. And now I want to circle back to what you said earlier about the API style section, because this is something that, is a favorite topic amongst our readers on the Toro Cloud blog and on our knowledge base developer. In hindsight, actually, we're going to have a JMS versus Kafka smackdown soon. So not a different technology, sure, but we're going to cover these in the future. But anyway, you have a API style section, which is a new addition, and you explored the 5 most common API styles you've observed from companies all over the world. So can you give us a quick rundown of what these are and why you think they've become and they've emerged as the most popular API styles?
Let's say, it's a chapter wrote by Eric Wilde, so he can definitely go deeper on that one. But the thing is, let's say you have really different style. You have the hypermedia APIs that a lot of people had a lot of hope in the early 2010s because it was pushed by Royal Fielding philosophy and REST philosophy and architectural style. Is the fact that you can interact with other APIs by referring them to every resource with links. And so like this, we kind of have a web of APIs. So it works well internally, but let's say it has been hard to implement, but this is a style that really is beautiful for the mind. Then you have kind of the CRUD style, one of the people use the most, like the, get, post, put, delete, and, having, respecting some of REST verbs, but let's say mostly interacting with in a CRUD style. You have the query style, like the GraphQL mostly. SOAP at the time, GraphQL now, that really enable to interact with different systems with the query language that enable to interact faster. This style is great when you control the backend and the front end. Right. So when you control the backend and the front end, it's a kind of a highway. You know what you're doing. It not will be open to everyone. It's a really controlled environment. And so you don't have to anticipate future use cases. Mostly it's really for some use case that you understand better. There is also the event-driven architecture aspect, the streaming kind of APIs or that are there. And now that's great because with now more and more services interacting with each other, if you have to pull every API all the time, say, look, hey, did you have something new for me? No. Okay. Did you have something new for me? Okay. It consumes a lot of resources and make the network quite busy. So now you can subscribe to some APIs and say, look, when something is new, just send me the notification, like broadcasting, streaming, broadcasting news. And so if you're signed up to the news, okay, you receive it. And so you can manage it accordingly. And we see a lot of traction in these event-driven APIs. Like some people in the software will say, yeah, we've done that 30 years ago, but it was with different styles, different technologies that was not enabling to do it, to really do it at scale. So, so there are really different style out there. You have the RPC style, which is really about calling a remote function. And having the ability to request a specific function of an API and get the answer. But again, with this RPC style, the thing is you can have some issues about naming. If you don't respect some conventions, and everybody call the function method the way they want, and you don't respect some let's say conventions like some REST conventions, it can be difficult. But for example, Slack has a great RPC style API, right? It's mostly made for bots. It's really about interactions, specific functionalities over the network, and it's not about resources. It's about bots who does a specific task, and the RPC was really successful for them. But I really invite you to go more on the chapter and dive the style a little bit more.
All right. So fantastic thoughts there, Mehdi. And we appreciate the energy and passion that you put through for the growth of APIs and the industry in general. Before we end the episodes, can you tell us how listeners can reach out to you, follow you, learn more about what you do, and of course, read the book, Continuous API Management?
So you can, of course, you can reach me on LinkedIn with my first name, last name. You will find me on Twitter. I'm Medjaoui, Medjaoui. So that's my handle on Twitter. You can sign up to APIDays Conferences on apidays.global website, and you will be able to register for free for online events or hybrid events, or if it's in your region, go in person, and so we can meet. And just to say, we try to have book signing to our in-person events. So if you also want a book, if you want to buy it online, of course you can, if you are in a hurry. But if you want to meet me, Mike, Eric, and Ronnie for a book signing, you can come to APIDays in-person events, and we will love to sign a book and offer you a complimentary version. So yeah, and last thing I wanted to say is the 10 years of APIDays, 10 years of conferences. So this year is quite special. And at the end of the year, we will try to gather all the top API influencers, most of your past podcast speakers, in an event in Paris. We expect like 4,000 people in person. We've booked let's say the French city of science and industry. It's like a huge, think like a museum of science, to really talk about the next 10 years of software. The past 10 years was, the rise of APIs, but what will be the next 10 years? So we will talk about that for the 10 years of APIDays.
Looking forward to that and hoping to see you soon in person as well, Mehdi. Thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hey listeners, thank you for joining us in this round of cocktails. Please like and subscribe to check out other episodes of this podcast series. We're also available on your favorite podcast platforms, or you can simply listen in at torocloud.com, where you'll find full episode transcripts and show notes. On behalf of the team here at Toro Cloud, thank you very much for listening to us today. This has been Kevin Montalvo for Coding Over Cocktails. Cheers!